5 Mexican Mafia members so dangerous. Even prison couldn't stop them. A correctional officer found him in his cell, stabbed 67 times. The victim was in protective custody, maximum security, locked down 23 hours a day. Yet someone inside still reached him. Court records would later reveal the order came from a man who hadn't left solitary confinement in 8 years. You're about to see how 5 men built the most powerful prison gang in American history. From inside concrete boxes, cut off from the world, under 24-hour surveillance, they still controlled streets, ordered executions, and ran criminal empires worth millions. According to federal prosecutors, the Mexican Mafia, LAIM, has over 150 members behind bars and commands more than 50,000 soldiers on the outside. This is how they did it. By the end, you'll understand why the FBI called one of these men the most dangerous inmate in the United States, even though he'd been locked in isolation for over a decade. What investigators found in his cell would change everything we thought we knew about prison control. But first, you need to see where this started. Pelican Bay State Prison, California, built in 1989 to house the most violent offenders in the state system. Inside its security housing unit, the SHU, inmates live in 8 by 10-foot windowless cells, 23 hours a day, some for decades. According to prison documents, the SHU was designed with one purpose: break the power of prison gangs. Total isolation. No contact visits. All communication monitored. Mail screened. Phone calls recorded. Former Warden Robert Ayers testified in federal court that Pelican Bay was built specifically to contain Mexican Mafia leaders. He called it the most secure facility in the western United States. It didn't work. LAIM was born in 1957 at the Dual Vocational Institution in Tracy, California. 13 young Hispanic inmates formed a protection group. Within a decade, according to California Department of Corrections records, they'd become the most feared organization in the state prison system. By the 1980s, federal investigators documented their reach. They controlled drug trafficking, extortion, and street gang activity across Southern California. From inside prison walls. Here's what made them different. Most prison gangs fight for territory inside. LAIM turned prison into a boardroom. Investigators discovered they were taxing street gangs on the outside, demanding a percentage of every drug sale, every robbery, every crime committed in their territory. A 1995 FBI report estimated they were generating over $8 million annually. The orders came from men who would never see the street again. So California built Pelican Bay. Maximum isolation. In 1989, they transferred the shot callers, the leaders, into the SHU. The state believed that would end it. Instead, according to court testimony from multiple cases, the violence escalated. Murders inside prisons increased. Street gang hits continued. Former prosecutor Richard Rosenthal testified, putting them in the SHU didn't stop them. It made them more efficient, because LAIM had something other gangs didn't: a code. Former member Rene Boxer Enriquez, who later cooperated with authorities, described it in testimony: blood in, blood out. You kill to join. You die to leave. No exceptions. That code meant absolute loyalty. And it meant that even from solitary confinement, their word was law. Federal investigators identified over 150 made members of LAIM by the year 2000. Made members are the elite, the decision makers. Below them, according to court records, tens of thousands of street soldiers followed orders without question. The men you're about to meet were at the very top. 5 names that appeared again and again in indictments, wiretaps, and confidential informant reports. The shot callers, the generals. But here's what law enforcement didn't understand at first. These men weren't leading through fear alone. They'd built a system, and that system worked even when they couldn't see it, touch it, or directly control it. You're about to see how. 5 men, maximum isolation, still running a criminal empire. The first name you need to know, the one the FBI called the Godfather of the Mexican Mafia, was already serving multiple life sentences when authorities realized just how dangerous he was. His reach would extend far beyond prison walls. But to understand how, you need to see the 3 unwritten rules that control life inside. If you want to see how deep this goes, hit subscribe. There's more to this story than most documentaries will show you. Laim's power didn't come from weapons or numbers. It came from 3 rules. Unwritten, enforced with death. Former members in law enforcement testimony reveal these rules operated with absolute consistency across every California prison. Rule 1, the tax. Every Hispanic gang member on the streets pays Laim. According to a 2006 federal racketeering indictment, street gangs in Los Angeles, Orange County, and the Inland Empire were required to pay a percentage of all criminal proceeds to the Mexican Mafia. Prosecutors documented the system. Members on the outside collected cash, drugs, or merchandise. They funneled it to designated tax collectors. The money moved through family visits, corrupt guards, and elaborate smuggling operations into the prison commissary accounts of Laim members. In one case from 2002, investigators traced over $300,000 of deposits to the prison accounts of just 3 Mexican Mafia members over an 18-month period. The money came from street gang drug sales across Southern California. What happened if you didn't pay? Court testimony from multiple cases describes the consequences. One former gang member testified under immunity. If your gang doesn't pay, they send a message. Someone gets hit on the streets. Someone you care about. In another documented incident from 1998, a street gang in East Los Angeles stopped paying the tax. According to witness testimony in a murder trial, a Mexican Mafia member in Pelican Bay sent word through a visitor. 2 weeks later, 3 members of that street gang were shot outside a liquor store. One died. The message was received. Payments resumed. But here's what made the system work. The orders didn't come directly from the shot caller. They moved through layers. Prison documents reveal how a message to a family member during a visit. That family member tells a street contact. The street contact passes it to a local gang leader. The gang leader orders the hit. No written evidence. No recorded calls. Just word of mouth. Rule 2. No betrayal. Ever. Former member Rene Enriquez testified extensively about this code. In his words, you can never leave the organization. There is no retirement. There is no resignation. If you cooperate with law enforcement, you die. Your family might die. That's understood from the day you're jumped in. Prison records document dozens of murders tied to this rule. In 2001, a Mexican Mafia associate named Daniel Chico Martinez was found dead in his cell at Corcoran State Prison. He'd been stabbed 47 times. Investigators later discovered he'd been seen talking to correctional officers. That was enough. The killer was another inmate, not a Mexican Mafia member, but a soldier from a street gang following orders. Court testimony revealed the directive came from a Laim shot caller who'd been in the SHU for 6 years. He never spoke to the killer directly. The order traveled through 3 intermediaries. Here's the terrifying part. The killer wasn't promised anything. No money, no rank, just the understanding that if he refused, he'd be next. Rule 3. Respect the hierarchy. Laim operates like a military organization. According to court records and testimony from former members, decisions are made collectively by the shot callers, the leaders. But once a decision is made, it's absolute. Federal wiretaps from a 2008 investigation captured this structure in action. Street gang members and recorded calls referred to Laim members by titles. The big homie, the carnales, the word. They never used names. They never questioned orders. In one intercepted conversation, a gang leader told his lieutenant, the word came down. We're green-lighting the Mongols in our area. That meant the Mexican Mafia had authorized attacks on members of the Mongols motorcycle gang. Within 72 hours, investigators documented 3 separate shootings targeting Mongols in Los Angeles County. The hierarchy worked because of fear, but also because of a twisted sense of honor. Former prosecutor Michael Emick testified in a RICO case. These men believed they were part of something bigger than themselves. They took pride in following orders. It gave them identity, status, protection. So you have 3 rules. Pay the tax. Never betray. Respect the hierarchy. Simple. Absolute. Enforced with murder. And here's why it mattered. These rules meant that even when the leaders were locked in isolation, unable to make phone calls, unable to have contact visits under constant surveillance, the organization kept running. Because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about the system they'd built. 3 rules. Thousands of soldiers. 1 code. Obey or die. Now you need to meet the 5 men who made this system unstoppable. Starting with the 1 investigators called the Godfather. Before we meet the 5 most dangerous members, you need to understand something most people never see. How do you run a criminal empire when you're locked in a concrete cell 23 hours a day? When every letter is screened, every phone call recorded, every visitor watched? Investigators spent decades trying to answer that question. What they found was a communication system so sophisticated, it took federal task forces years to crack. Start with the mail. California prison policy requires all inmate correspondence to be screened. Letters are opened, read, checked for coded language. Former correctional investigator Steve Rigg testified in a 2007 case. We knew they were communicating. We just couldn't prove it. The letters looked like normal family updates. But prosecutors later uncovered the system. Mexican Mafia members used a code called the Nahuatl system, named after the ancient Aztec language. Simple substitutions. Innocent words with hidden meanings. Tell Uncle the car is ready meant a hit was approved. The kids miss you meant money was collected. In a 2009 racketeering case, investigators presented 47 letters sent from LAE members in the SHU to family members. Decoded, they contained orders for 9 murders, approval for drug shipments, and instructions for tax collection across 6 counties. Then there's the visiting room. By regulation, contact visits are prohibited in the SHU. Visits happen behind glass. Conversations through phones. All recorded. So LAE adapted. According to testimony from former member Rene Enriquez, they developed a visual code. Hand signals. Subtle gestures. A scratch of the nose. Fingers on the glass in a specific pattern. Prosecutors documented this in a 2011 case. Over 200 hours of visiting room footage analyzed by gang investigators revealed a consistent set of signals used across multiple inmates. But the most dangerous method involved corrupt staff. Between 2005 and 2015, according to California Department of Corrections Internal Affairs reports, at least 19 correctional officers and civilian employees at California prisons were arrested for smuggling contraband or passing messages for the Mexican Mafia. In one case from 2012, a correctional officer at Corcoran State Prison was caught on surveillance footage passing a cell phone to an inmate. When investigators searched the inmate's cell, a Mexican Mafia member, they found a phone hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Text messages on that phone included orders for 3 murders, drug trafficking routes, and tax collection schedules. The officer later testified she'd been paid $500 per delivery. She made 11 deliveries over 8 months. When asked why she did it, she said, "I was scared. They knew where my kids went to school." That's the part most people don't understand. Lying doesn't just threaten inmates. Court records document threats against correctional officers, prosecutors, judges, and witnesses. In a 2008 case, a Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney received a letter at her home address. It contained a photo of her daughter's elementary school. No words, just a photo. The prosecutor requested protective custody for her family and recused herself from the case. But here's the system's real genius. Redundancy. If one communication method gets shut down, there are 3 more. Prison officials block letters. They use visitors. Visitors get restricted. They use corrupt guards. Guards get caught. They use inmate transfers. Federal investigators documented this in a 2013 report. When a Mexican Mafia member is transferred from one prison to another, he carries messages. Memorized. Never written down. Delivered verbally to members at the new facility, who then send a message outward through their own networks. Former FBI agent John Kinney, who spent a decade investigating LAE, testified, "It's the most sophisticated prison gang communication network in the country. They're not criminals playing at organization. They're organized criminals who happen to be in prison." And that brings us to the 5 men who perfected this system. 5 names that appear in over 100 federal and state indictments. 5 shot callers who, according to law enforcement, controlled La Eames operations for decades. Ruben Nite Castro, born 1943, East Los Angeles. Convicted of murder in 1971. According to court records, Castro became a Mexican Mafia member while serving his sentence at San Quentin State Prison in the mid-1970s. By the 1980s, federal investigators identified him as one of La Eames' top leaders, a shot caller with influence over street gangs across Southern California. Here's what made Castro different. Testimony from former members describes him as a strategist. While other members focused on violence and enforcement, Castro built alliances. He brokered peace treaties between rival street gangs, but only if they paid tribute to La Eames. In 1992, investigators documented a meeting in the LA County Jail between Castro and representatives from multiple street gangs. According to witness testimony, Castro proposed a ceasefire. No gang-on-gang violence in East LA. Cooperate on drug distribution. Split profits. But the Mexican Mafia took a 10% tax on everything. The gangs agreed. For the next 3 years, gang violence in that area dropped by 40%, according to LAPD statistics. But drug trafficking arrests increased by 60%. The peace wasn't peace. It was business. Castro was transferred to Pelican Bay in 1995, locked in the SHU. Total isolation. Prosecutors thought it was over. It wasn't. In 2001, a federal racketeering indictment named Castro as the lead defendant in a case involving 23 co-conspirators. The indictment alleged he'd ordered 6 murders, all from inside the SHU. All between 1996 and 2000. Prosecutors presented evidence of letters sent to family members, phone calls from other inmates on his behalf, messages passed during legal visits with his attorney, visits that are supposed to be confidential. One murder stood out. In 1998, a street gang member named Miguel Gonzalez was killed outside his home in Pomona. He'd been shot execution style. Witnesses testified Gonzalez had refused to pay the tax, claimed he was independent, not part of the Mexican Mafia system. Court records show Castro sent a letter to his sister 3 weeks before the murder. One line read, "Tell the boys in Pomona that family always comes first." Prosecutors argued this was coded authorization for the hit. The killer, a 19-year-old gang member who'd never met Castro, testified in exchange for a reduced sentence. He said, "I got the word from my shot caller. The big homie wanted it done. You don't ask questions. You just do it." Castro was convicted on racketeering and conspiracy charges in 2004. Additional life sentence. Returned to the SHU at Pelican Bay. Here's the twist. After his conviction, investigators monitoring Mexican Mafia activity noticed something. Castro's name kept appearing in wiretaps, in informant reports, in letters seized from other inmates. FBI agent John Kinney testified in a later case. Convicting Castro didn't remove him from power. If anything, elevated him. He became a legend. Younger members saw him as untouchable, still calling shots from the deepest hole in the system. Castro remains in Pelican Bay SHU. He's now in his 80s. And according to the California Department of Corrections, he's still classified as an active Mexican Mafia member. Peter Sana Ojeda, born 1958, Los Angeles. Multiple convictions for assault, robbery, and murder. According to court documents, Ojeda became a Mexican Mafia member in the early 1980s while incarcerated at Folsom State Prison. Unlike Castro, Ojeda built his reputation through violence. Testimony from former inmates describes him as an enforcer, the man who carried out hits personally before rising to leadership. Prison records document at least 4 separate incidents where Ojeda was identified as the primary suspect in inmate assaults. In 1987, an inmate at Folsom was stabbed during a yard fight. Investigators found a makeshift knife, a sharpened piece of metal, hidden in a shower drain. Ojeda's fingerprints were on it. He was charged with attempted murder. Convicted. Additional 15 years added to his sentence. Transferred to Corcoran. At Corcoran, according to incident reports, Ojeda became a shot caller. Former member Rene Enriquez testified that Ojeda was known as the Muscle, the member who handled discipline within the organization. In one documented case from 1995, a Mexican Mafia associate was suspected of skimming drug profits. Court testimony describes what happened next. Ojeda called a meeting in the prison chapel, a place where inmates from different yards could gather for religious services. The associate was stabbed 23 times in front of 40 other inmates. No one intervened. No one reported it. When correctional officers arrived, they found the victim bleeding out on the chapel floor. He survived but refused to identify his attackers. Investigators suspected Ojeda ordered the hit, but without witnesses, they couldn't charge him. What happened next shows how Laim operates. The victim, after recovering, requested protective custody, PC. That meant he'd be separated from the general population, protected from further attacks. 2 months later, he was found dead in his PC cell, strangled. An inmate in protective custody, supposedly isolated from gang members, had still been reached. Court records from a later investigation revealed Ojeda had sent a kite, a smuggled note, to another inmate in the PC unit. The note said, "Loose ends." That was enough. Ojeda was transferred to Pelican Bay in 1998. Maximum isolation. Federal prosecutors included him in a 2006 RICO indictment alongside 34 other defendants. According to trial testimony, even from the SHU, Ojeda continued to approve hits. One prosecutor stated, "He was the executioner, and he never stopped executing." Daniel Black Dan Barela, born 1960, San Bernardino, convicted of drug trafficking in 1983. According to federal investigators, Barela became a Mexican Mafia member in the late 1980s and quickly rose to prominence, not through violence, but through negotiation. Testimony from former members describes Barela as a diplomat. He brokered deals between the Mexican Mafia and other criminal organizations, including the Aryan Brotherhood and the Black Guerrilla family. In the early 1990s, California prisons were at war. Racial violence between Hispanic, white, and black inmates resulted in dozens of deaths each year. Prosecutors documented this period as one of the bloodiest in state prison history. Then something changed. In 1993, according to court documents, a truce was negotiated at Pelican Bay. Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, and Black Guerrilla family leaders agreed to stop the race-based violence. Instead, they'd cooperate on drug trafficking inside the prisons. Investigative reports credit Barela as the architect of that truce. He proposed a system. Each gang controlled distribution in their own racial group. No crossing lines. But everyone paid a tax to a shared fund, used to bribe guards and smuggle contraband. The truce held for nearly a decade. Violence dropped, but drug overdoses increased. Former correctional officer James Martinez testified in a 2005 case. The gangs stopped killing each other and started poisoning the whole system. It was worse. Barela's reach extended beyond prison. Federal wiretaps from a 2008 investigation captured phone calls between street gang members discussing the word from Black Dan. The calls revealed Barela was coordinating drug shipments from Mexico into Southern California, directing operations from inside the SHU. In one intercepted call, a gang member said, "Black Dan wants us to move the product through San Diego. Border's tight, but he's got people." Investigators later arrested 3 individuals at the Otay Mesa border crossing with 50 kilograms of methamphetamine hidden in a truck. Barela was named in the indictment. Additional charges. Additional life sentence. But like the others, his influence didn't stop. Benjamin Topo Peters, born 1955, Los Angeles. Details of his early convictions are sealed. But according to federal prosecutors, Peters became a Mexican Mafia member in the 1970s and operated with extreme secrecy. Testimony from law enforcement describes Peters as the Ghost, a member who avoided direct involvement in violence, never appeared in wiretaps, and left almost no paper trail. So how do we know about him? Because informants kept naming him. Between 2000 and 2010, At least 6 cooperating witnesses in separate cases identified Peters as a Mexican Mafia shot caller. One former member testified. Topo didn't talk. He listened. You'd bring him a problem, he'd think for a day, then give you an answer. That answer was final. No debate. Investigators believe Peters used a proxy system, sending messages through intermediaries who had no idea who the original source was. Former FBI agent Maria Gonzalez testified. We'd intercept communications, follow the chain backward, and it would dead end. Someone would say they got the order from someone else, who got it from someone else. By the time you traced it back, there was no evidence linking Peters directly. But in 2009, a breakthrough. A correctional officer at Pelican Bay, caught smuggling cell phones, agreed to cooperate. He testified Peters had paid him $1,000 per phone. Over 2 years, the officer delivered 7 phones. Investigators seized one of those phones from another inmate. The text messages led to a racketeering indictment involving 19 defendants. The messages included orders for murders, extortion schemes, and drug trafficking routes. Forensic analysis traced the phones used to periods when Peters had access to it. Peters was convicted in 2011. During sentencing, the judge stated, "You operated in the shadows. But the evidence is clear. You were pulling strings." Peters received an additional life sentence. He remains in the SHU at Pelican Bay. And according to prison officials, he's never given a single interview, never cooperated, never spoken publicly. Donnie Muerte Ortiz, born 1962, East Los Angeles. Multiple convictions for murder, robbery, and assault. According to federal prosecutors, the FBI labeled him the most dangerous inmate in the United States in 2007. Why? Because even from inside Pelican Bay's SHU, where he'd been locked in isolation for 12 years, investigators linked him to 14 murders on the streets. Court documents describe Ortiz as ruthless. Former member Rene Enriquez testified. Donnie didn't negotiate. He didn't do diplomacy. If you crossed line, you were dead. He'd order a hit on your whole family, if that's what it took. In 2005, a federal investigation called Operation Silent Night targeted Ortiz specifically. Wiretaps, surveillance, informants, everything focused on proving he was still running operations. What they found was stunning. Ortiz had developed a communication system using his attorney. Confidential legal visits are protected. No recording, no monitoring. Prosecutors alleged Ortiz's lawyer was smuggling messages in legal documents. The attorney was disbarred in 2007 after an ethics investigation. He denied wrongdoing, but prosecutors presented evidence. Letters written in legal jargon that, when decoded, contained orders for murders and drug shipments. If this kind of investigative breakdown is what you're here for, drop a like so we know to keep digging deeper. In one case from 2006, a rival gang member in Fresno was shot and killed. Investigators traced the order through 6 intermediaries back to a letter Ortiz's attorney had carried out of Pelican Bay 2 weeks earlier. Ortiz was indicted in 2008 on 22 counts, including RICO conspiracy, murder for hire, and obstruction of justice. During the trial, prosecutors played recorded phone calls from his family members to street gang leaders. The calls referenced Uncle Donnie's wishes. One gang member testified, "When Donnie's family called, you listened. It wasn't a request. It was a directive. You didn't want to be on his list." Ortiz was convicted in 2009. He remains in Pelican Bay, now serving multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. But here's the final twist, the one that changes everything. After the 2009 conviction, federal investigators thought they'd broken the back of La Im's leadership. 5 of the most dangerous members locked down. Communication methods exposed. Corruption networks dismantled. Then in 2012, something happened. A correctional officer at Pelican Bay requested a private meeting with FBI investigators. What he told them would reveal the darkest truth about the Mexican Mafia's power. During a routine cell search of Donald Ortiz, officers found something hidden inside a hollowed-out section of his concrete bunk. Not a weapon, not drugs, a ledger, handwritten, over 200 pages. According to court testimony, The ledger contained detailed financial records, names of street gang members, amounts owed, amounts paid, dates of transactions. It covered a 3-year period, from 2009 to 2012. Here's what shook investigators. The ledger showed the Mexican Mafia wasn't just collecting drug money. They were taxing legitimate businesses. Prosecutors matched names in the ledger to real businesses in Southern California. Tire shops, restaurants, construction companies, small businesses in Hispanic neighborhoods. A federal task force launched in 2013 interviewed over 40 business owners. Most refused to talk, but a few under immunity agreements confirmed it. Gang members would come in, claim to represent Laim, and demand monthly payments. If you refused, your shop got vandalized. Your employees got threatened. Your family got visits at home. One restaurant owner testified. They said it was protection money, but we all knew what it really was. You paid, or they destroyed you. The ledger showed over $2.7 million collected in 3 years. From businesses alone. That didn't include drug money, which prosecutors estimated was 10 times higher. So here's what most people don't know. The Mexican Mafia isn't just a prison gang. They're a criminal enterprise that infiltrated entire communities. And they did it from inside concrete boxes, with nothing but a code, a network, and a willingness to kill anyone who broke the rules. The 5 men you just heard about, they're still in prison, still in isolation. But according to law enforcement, Laim's operations continue. New members step up. New systems evolve. Because the system was never about the individuals. It was always about the code. Before I leave you, make sure you're subscribed, because the next story is about a prison you won't believe exists on U.S. soil. 5 men. Maximum isolation. Still running an empire. Ruben Nite, Castro, the Godfather who built alliances from inside. Peter Ojeda, the enforcer who never stopped executing. Daniel Black Dan Barela, the diplomat who turned enemies into partners. Benjamin Topo Peters, the ghost who left no trace. And Donnie Muerte Ortiz, the one the FBI call the most dangerous. Together, they prove something terrifying. That power doesn't require freedom. It requires control. And the Mexican Mafia controls through a code so absolute, even concrete walls can't contain it. Blood in, blood out. No exceptions. If you want to see how other prison systems try to stop the spread of gangs and failed, check out the video on screen now. Because this isn't just California's problem. It's spreading.